Okay, video number 2, I'm going to take on this variegated leaf that you see here. We have basically 3 tones here. 2 greens, a dark green, a mid green, and then that kind of creamy yellow. I'm not going to use the yellow, although I could easily do so. What I'm going to do is go basically start with my mid-tone. And I'm going to see what I think is the mid-tone, and that looks pretty good. That looks like a, what is that? That's a 30. So that would stand in for this tone right here. So as you bring this close to view, you can see what I'm actually doing is selecting out that color right there. Okay, so, and I will randomly change this as I go, as I want to do. What I'm going for is the effect, not perfect recreation of my reference, although if I wanted to I could do it. But to me, it's about using your reference to create the impression of something. When I have jobs that I do, I never use a photo. Well, that's not true. I do once in a while use a photo straight on, but I still have to alter it in various ways. If it's a car, so I just rendered a Merc, a 49 Mercury, and I did use the exact view, but I had to modify it because they produce different body stylings and also different markings and a different grill, so I had to change all that stuff on the view. I also, at the request of the client, had to change the perspective, the degree of distortion from front to back. And there was a fair amount of redrawing, and I actually did the drawing on the fly. I actually did it as the final render. So you can see here, I'm leaving what is light, or yellow as light. And my base tone is the mid-tone. Let's just bring that right up. And you notice too, I block in each leaf as a unit to keep myself from getting confused in this case now between the different leaves. But you know, if I'm doing a lot of leaves, I'm probably going to go faster. I'm probably going to create more of an impression of individual leaves than trying to render every leaf out. This is a real close-in render because we want to get at the texture. And so I take the time to actually do that work of rendering out each leaf first in the first tone. And interesting thing, I'm going to finish with this 30, and you will see the shape of the leaves actually form up. I think you can probably see it right now. I made up one really unusually large leaf just for demonstration purposes, so I did this really big leaf here. I'm actually going to switch my marker around. Like I say, changing color on the surface means you're rendering the 2 colors, if you have 2 colors. In this case, I really have 3, but I have 2 major colors. I've got the yellow and the green. So I know the green is part of a whole. I start with a lighter value that I see, and then I'll go in and actually do the darker value. And what is that darker value? So let's test this out. I'm actually got my hands on a 70 here. That might be a touch dark, but you know what? Let's go for it. I feel bold. And you can see there's the jagged break here. I'm actually simulating that. It's not perfectly matching the reference. It doesn't have to. In reality, nobody's going to see the photo that you used as a source. They're going to just look at your render, and if you captured the general effect correctly, then you're free to innovate and change throughout the rendering. I had a colleague who came out of CCS with a great portfolio. I think I told a little bit of this story, but he got a great job to do. I was so envious. Full spread illustration for an automotive magazine, and watercolor ink and ink pen. he did it. It was beautiful. It went out in the morning. It came back in the afternoon with some substantial changes. And I remember him sitting there lifting the flap up, and his face went white, as in, I have never learned how to do changes on my work. And this led to somebody else having to take over and actually do his changes for him. But he learned how to do changes. It was a very, watercolor and transparent ink washes are very difficult to do changes on. But you know, he was very good designer. In his mind, he could just design wonderfully in his illustrations, which I really appreciated. But also the other thing he didn't have was he didn't have a good understanding of perspective, which he had to learn on the job. You know, that sometimes that's the way it is. When I render something like this, I think of him sometimes when I have to take reference that is the wrong view but the right object or the right material, and I have to turn it to fit the scene, and then I have to relight it just out of my head, saying what would happen with this material if I had it in different lighting. If I can't find an example of it with that lighting, then I have to really extrapolate. And you can see I'm actually so used to doing that I can just keep going with the reference in my one eye and kind of just generally navigate around here and create the pattern like that. Just continue even variations and render out a bunch of leaves like this as my base tones, and then just proceed to doing detail. So I'm just going to finish this one gigantic leaf I made here. I just made this so I could maybe show you some pencil work. It was easier to see. So in this case, the mid-tone first, the darker tone over the top, and you can see it already is coming together. It already looks a lot like that reference that we have here. And if you see that happening, if it just seems to be coming together before you've done any detail, then you're on the right track. Your process is probably good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to simulate the yellow with just like a 10% gray. It would be interesting to take a yellow pencil and add it in here, but I'm not going to do that here, because this lemon yellow is about a 10% tone, maybe 5 to 10. Excuse me. Now I'm actually thinking of doing something here to show you again an example of the power of something going from a white background to a black background. I'm looking at this and I'm seeing this bright, light edge detail, and I'm thinking, boy, that would really separate out of a dark background very nicely. I may just hold off on that though, may not do it at all, but okay, so now pencil work. I see darkness near the vein, the center vein. So I'm going to do a fade like that. And leave a hint of a vein in between. Now, watch what happens again. Just taking a 10 and just taking that pencil and just feathering it out. Feathering it. So when I feather, I mean I'm lifting the marker a little bit and just stroking away from the center vein so I don't lose it. And you see I get that little, rather dramatic actually, tone change in the middle. I did lose a bit of the vein, so I can bring it back. The vein structure starting to take hold. Just a touch of white pencil in this case, you know, and it just suddenly is there. This is an easy render, by the way. So I'm actually going to say, let's leave this on white. What do you do when you have a light, very pale edge on white? Well, you got to define it somehow. How do you do that? Well, I left my pencil line there, and I'm going to put a stroke. Try to keep it narrow right along that edge, like so. Now this is not present in the reference, but if I was rendering this on a white background, I'd have to do something like this just to separate off of this white background. And it works. It's interesting. It just sometimes you have to fabricate an aspect of your render just to make it work in this new environment. And then I'm going to put a little bit of a curve on the outside edge there. Let's blend. Let's get a little more drama. So again, I'm on my third pass on this middle section of the leaf. And I actually put this tone right over that pencil. I'm going to do the same thing here. And then scrub it out at the center. Let it disappear. You know, fades into nothingness are a great way to say photographic effect. A shadow passing in front. I think you can see already how dramatic the shift was, just adding a little bit of pencil work, but the key was getting those first three tones in right.